Hey everyone, welcome back to the deep dive. So last time we were exploring the world of narcissist manipulation, all those sneaky tactics they use to control and exploit others. It was pretty intense, right? Well, today we're going even deeper. We're focusing on one specific strategy that can be super tricky to spot: love bombing.
Yeah, it's a term that's become really popular lately, like you see it everywhere online. But a lot of those explanations just scratch the surface. Today, we're going to really unpack it. We're going to look at the psychology behind it, why it works, who's vulnerable, and how love bombing can pop up in places you might not even expect.
I think you're right about those surface level explanations. And honestly, I bet a lot of us have even encountered love bombing without even realizing it. I remember this one time. Well, actually, you know what? Let's say that story for a bit later. First, let's just make sure everyone's on the same page.
Yeah.
What exactly are we talking about when we say love bombing?
Right, good point. At its core, love bombing is a tactic, a calculated one, where someone just showers you with all this attention, affection, and flattery, like nonstop. They're basically trying to manufacture this intense whirlwind romance and sweep you off your feet.
Okay, so I'm picturing you're suddenly getting bombarded with romantic gestures, nonstop compliments, maybe even expensive gifts out of the blue. It's like they're trying to create a fairy tale.
Exactly. And that's a big part of why it works so well. It taps into all those stories we've been told about love and romance, all those cultural narratives that make us think grand gestures equal true love. So we're kind of primed to fall for it.
But wouldn't someone with a healthy sense of self-esteem be able to see through that? It just seems too good to be true.
That's a really good question. And yeah, you'd think so, right? But research actually suggests that people who maybe have lower self-esteem, who crave that validation and attention, are the ones who are most susceptible to love bombing. It's like they see all this intense affection as something they've always wanted, so they're more willing to overlook any red flags.
So it's almost like they're preying on those vulnerabilities.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Love bombing doesn't just happen in romantic relationships. It can happen between friends, at work, even with strangers.
Really? With strangers? Okay, I have to hear more about this. How does love bombing even play out, say, in a workplace setting? It's not like your boss is going to start sending you roses, right?
Probably not,
Yeah.
no. But they might use other tactics. Think about it. Maybe there's a new colleague who just constantly praises your work, always offers to help with projects, even buys you coffee every morning. On the surface, it all seems harmless enough, right? But it's all part of creating that same feeling of being special, valued, the same way that happens in a romantic context.
Oh, wow. I'm starting to see how sneaky this can be.
Yeah.
It's like they're building this whole illusion of intimacy and connection just to gain your trust.
Exactly. And that's where the manipulation really kicks in. Think of love bombing as a kind of test. The narcissist is basically figuring out how easily you're influenced. If you're, like, super impressed by all these grand gestures, romantic or not, it tells them that they can probably control you.
It all makes so much more sense now. It's like they're looking for someone who's easily swayed, who falls for all the flattery and attention.
Exactly. And once they've got that control, they can start using it to their advantage. Maybe they start asking for favors all the time, manipulate you into making decisions that benefit them, or even isolate you from other people in your life.
Yeah, this whole conversation is really making me rethink some of my past experiences. There was this one friend I had. Okay, she was always showering me with compliments, telling me how amazing I was, inviting me to all these exclusive events. At first, I felt so special. I was like, wow, I finally found someone who really gets me.
It's so easy to get caught up in that feeling, especially if it's something you've been craving.
Exactly. But then things started to change. She'd get all upset if I hung out with other friends, or she'd guilt trip me into doing things her way. And looking back, it was totally part of her plan to control me.
That's such a classic example of how love bombing can morph into more, well, blatant manipulation.
Yeah.
It's all about getting you hooked on that feeling of validation so that you'll jump through hoops to keep it going.
Wow. This has been such an eye-opening conversation. It really makes you realize how important it is to be aware of these tactics.
Totally agree. The more you understand about love bombing, the better you'll be at spotting it and protecting yourself. And remember, it's not about being cynical or suspicious of everyone. It's just about paying attention to those little red flags, trusting your gut.
And don't forget, genuine kindness and affection do exist. Not every nice thing someone does is automatically some manipulative tactic.
Yeah.
The key is to look at the whole picture, their intentions, their behavior patterns, all of that.
Absolutely. Love bombing is all about control and exploitation, not genuine connection.
So, to everyone listening out there, take a minute to think about your own relationships. Have you ever felt like something was just a little too intense, a little too good to be true? Trust your instincts and remember, you deserve relationships that are built on mutual respect, not manipulation and control.
Well said. All right, so today we are going to be diving deep into something that's both fascinating but also kind of tricky.
Yeah.
And that is love bombing.
Mhm.
And not just what it is, but we're going to really get into it, like the different ways it can manifest and why it works and how we can become what Dr. Ramani calls
Yeah.
love bomb resistant.
Yeah. What's really interesting about this is that love bombing, it's not just this sort of surface level tactic.
Mm,
It really preys on our deeper vulnerabilities.
right.
And the more we understand those,
Yeah.
the better equipped we are to actually spot it and protect ourselves from it.
Totally. And for this deep dive, we've got two sources, a YouTube video by Dr. Ramani, who really breaks down all the different styles or types of love bombing.
Okay.
And then we've got an excerpt from a Spanish source that's also going to bring some unique perspectives to the table. So let's start with the basics.
Fair.
What is love bombing?
So at its core, it's really about overwhelming someone with affection and gifts and attention. All that good stuff,
Yeah.
like very, very early on in a relationship.
Yeah.
It can feel like a fairy tale,
Yeah.
almost too good to be true.
And the Spanish source that we're going to be looking at uses this great phrase. They describe it as like a rain of romantic details.
Yeah, I like that.
Which I think perfectly captures that feeling of
Right.
being swept off your feet.
Yeah, definitely.
And they also point out that this tactic works especially well on people who idealize princes or princesses, which makes sense, right?
Yeah.
We all have these deep-seated desires for connection, romance, and all of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But here's the crucial point. I think
Yeah.
love bombing is not about genuine affection.
Oh.
This is actually a calculated strategy for gaining control.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of like they're building this really intense, almost addictive bond.
Right.
And that makes it really hard for the person on the receiving end to see the manipulator's true intentions.
Okay, so that's a little bit of a
Yeah.
sobering thought, right? It makes you wonder, why are some of us more susceptible to this than others?
Well, Dr. Ramani points out that we all have vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
And these often stem from our past experiences.
Right.
And she calls these our schemas. Basically, it's our mental frameworks built from those experiences that shape how we view the world.
Right.
And particularly our relationships.
So it's like these subconscious blueprints
Yes.
that can actually make us more susceptible to certain types of love bombing.
Yes.
That's both fascinating and kind of scary.
It is fascinating. For instance, someone with abandonment issues, right, might be particularly drawn to an obsessive love bomber, the one that's constantly texting, declaring their adoration.
Yeah.
And this constant attention can actually feel incredibly validating,
Yeah.
especially if you've craved that level of reassurance in the past.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
So Dr. Ramani also dives into all these different styles of love bombing, which I thought was super insightful.
Great.
Let's start with the grandiose love bomber. What are some telltale signs of this type?
So this is your lavish gifts, extravagant trips,
Yeah.
a constant stream of compliments.
Okay.
It's all about creating that whirlwind romance, just sweeping you off your feet
Right.
with these grand gestures.
Yeah.
And this type is particularly effective, I think, because they tap into our desire for excitement and
Right.
novelty.
Mm.
We're wired to seek out pleasure.
Yeah.
And this kind of attention really triggers those reward centers in our brain,
Yeah.
making it feel even more irresistible.
It's like they're playing the role of the perfect partner.
Yeah,
Almost too good to be true, which, as we've established, can
sure.
be a red flag.
Exactly.
Okay, so then we have the obsessive type, which we sort of touched on before.
Right.
This is the person who's bombarding you with attention, whether it's through texts or calls, declarations of love,
Yeah.
all that. Good morning, beautiful. Good night, my love. At
Yeah.
first, that can feel really flattering.
Yeah. It can.
He's like, oh my gosh, this person can't get enough of me.
Yeah.
But as you said, it can become suffocating.
It can.
It's almost like they're trying to create the sense of dependency where you need their constant affirmation to feel secure.
Right. And what's interesting here is that this tactic is actually leveraging something called the mere exposure effect.
Oh.
It's a psychological principle that states that the more we're exposed to something,
Okay.
the more we tend to like it.
Oh, wow.
So that constant attention, even if it feels overwhelming, it creates this sense of familiarity that can be mistaken for genuine connection.
Oh, wow. So they're like hacking our brains without us even realizing it.
In a way, yes.
Okay, so let's move on to the controlling love bomber. This one sounds particularly concerning.
Yeah.
What are some warning signs we should be looking out for?
So this type is all about moving the relationship forward at a very rapid pace.
Okay.
They might pressure you to commit early on,
Right.
try to isolate you from friends and family,
Oh,
constantly demand to know your whereabouts.
Wow.
It's all about establishing that control and dominance within the relationship.
and I imagine this type would be particularly appealing to someone who maybe craves stability, like they're coming out of a chaotic relationship.
Exactly.
And this very controlled environment might feel like a safe haven.
You're exactly right. And that's why it's so crucial to understand our own vulnerability,
Yes.
those schemas,
Yeah.
because they can make us particularly susceptible to certain tactics.
Yeah.
For example, someone with a fear of abandonment
Right.
might find that controlling love bombers' possessiveness reassuring
Right.
rather than alarming.
Yeah, totally. So how do we start unpacking those vulnerabilities, those patterns that might be making us susceptible to these tactics?
Well, first, let's explore a few more of these love bombing styles that Dr. Armani describes.
Okay.
And then we'll dig deeper into the self-awareness piece,
Yeah.
which is absolutely key to becoming love bomb resistant.
Okay.
Are you ready to delve into the ICU love bomber?
Oh, yeah. Let's unpack that one.
Okay, the ICU love bomber is interesting.
Yeah.
Because on the surface, they seem incredibly attentive and genuinely interested in you.
Yeah.
They're asking thoughtful questions,
Mm-hmm.
remembering little details.
Right.
They really make you feel seen and understood.
Okay.
But
yeah.
and this is but
Yep.
there's often a darker side to this attentiveness.
Oh, okay. So how does this ICU tactic become manipulative? Like, what should we be looking out for?
Just sprinkled in with all the validation and the attentiveness
Yeah.
are these subtle digs or backhanded compliments or even gaslighting.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they're slowly chipping away at your self-esteem while simultaneously showering you with praise.
Oh, wow.
So it can be incredibly confusing because they are offering genuine connection and validation,
Right.
but they're also using it as a way to kind of gain control.
It's almost like a bait and switch where they lure you in with this feeling of being deeply understood.
Yeah.
And then they slowly start to undermine your confidence and make you more dependent on them. That's really insidious.
It is. And because it's so subtle,
Right.
it can be really hard to detect,
Right.
especially if you're craving that validation and connection.
Totally.
It's like they're exploiting our desire to be seen and understood
Yeah.
for their own manipulative purposes.
Yeah. And it just highlights, again, how crucial self-awareness is in all of this.
Absolutely.
Because if we're not aware of our own vulnerabilities,
Yeah.
our own patterns, we're
Mhm.
much more likely to fall prey to these tactics.
Exactly. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about the I need you love bomber.
Okay.
So this is the type that positions themselves as someone who desperately needs your help,
Right.
your guidance, your support.
Mhm.
You become their savior, their fixer, their rock.
Oh, man. This one resonates with me. I think a lot of us, especially those who are naturally empathetic,
Right.
we fall into this trap, right?
Yeah,
We want to help. We want to be there for someone.
Mm-hmm.
And this type really plays on that.
they do.
But where does the manipulation come in?
Well, it's often a very one-way street.
Right.
The I need you love bomber will take and take and take,
Yeah.
but rarely give anything substantial in return.
Right.
So they might constantly lean on you for emotional support,
Mm-hmm.
financial assistance,
Yeah.
practical help.
Right.
But when you need something from them,
Yeah.
they're often nowhere to be found.
So they're exploiting our empathy, our desire to be helpful for their own gain.
Yeah.
And that can be incredibly draining, both emotionally and practically.
Absolutely. All right, let's look at the grown-up love bomber.
Okay.
This is someone who on the surface appears to have their life together.
Mm-hmm.
They're responsible, financially stable, mature.
Yeah.
After dating someone immature or irresponsible,
Right.
this type can seem incredibly appealing.
Oh, I can totally see that. It's like they check all the boxes on paper.
Yeah.
So they seem like a safe and secure choice.
Exactly.
I'm guessing there's more to it than meets the eye.
Right. While they might initially come across as stable and reliable, those controlling tendencies often emerge later.
Oh, okay.
So the judgmental comments,
Mm-hmm.
the attempts to control your finances,
Okay.
the subtle ways they try to isolate you from your support system.
Wow.
Those red flags start popping up
Right.
once they feel like they've secured your trust.
It's like they lull you into this false sense of security, and then the true colors come out.
Exactly.
And I imagine this type, again, would be really appealing to someone who's craving that stability and security.
Yeah.
Maybe after a string of tumultuous relationships.
Precisely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It all comes back to understanding those patterns and
Right.
vulnerabilities.
Right.
The more we know ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
the better equipped we are to spot those red flags,
Right.
regardless of how charming or appealing someone might seem on the surface.
Totally. Okay, let's move on to the offset love bomber.
Yeah.
What makes this type unique?
Okay, so this is the person who seems to be the polar opposite of your past partners.
Oh, interesting.
It's almost as if they've studied your dating history
Mm.
and tailored themselves to be your ideal match.
Oh, wow.
They might embody all the qualities that you've been craving,
Right.
making them seem irresistible.
Wait, so you're saying they're basically mirroring our desires, playing on our unmet needs.
In a way, yes.
That's both brilliant and unsettling.
It is. And to be fair, sometimes this can be a genuine case of compatibility.
Right.
Maybe their personality just happens to align perfectly with what you've been looking for.
Right.
However, more often than not, it's a calculated strategy to create that instant connection
Yeah.
that makes it even harder for you to see any potential red flags.
So how do we differentiate between genuine compatibility and this manipulative mirroring?
That's a great question.
Because that seems like a tricky line to navigate.
It is, and that's where paying attention to those subtle red flags becomes so crucial,
Okay.
those inconsistencies in their behavior.
Yeah.
It's also important to trust your gut instinct
Mhm.
if something feels off,
Yeah.
even if you can't quite put your finger on it.
Right.
Don't dismiss that feeling.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground with Dr. Romani's categories,
We have.
but I want to circle back to our Spanish source for a second because they brought up a really fascinating point.
Okay.
They emphasize that love bombing isn't just a romantic tactic.
Right?
It can be used in all sorts of relationships, like friendships,
Mhm.
business deals, even with strangers.
That's such an important point, I think.
Yeah.
It expands our understanding of love bombing from this purely romantic phenomenon
Right.
to this broader social strategy for gaining influence and control.
I never even considered that before, but it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Like, think about that overly helpful colleague who showers you with praise and then asks you for a huge favor,
Right.
or that friend who constantly seeks your advice
Yeah.
but rarely offers support in return. Could those be considered forms of love bombing?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Charismatic narcissists in particular are very adept at using these tactics
Okay.
in various contexts.
Mm-hmm.
They know how to charm and flatter and manipulate to get what they want,
Right.
whether it's a promotion alone or simply your unwavering loyalty.
So it's like they're constantly testing the waters, seeing who they can charm, who they can manipulate
Yeah.
by showering them with all this attention and flattery.
Right.
That's a little bit scary, honestly.
It can be, but remember, knowledge is power.
Yeah.
The more we understand these tactics,
Right.
the better equipped we are to spot them and protect ourselves
Yeah.
regardless of the context.
Okay, so we've covered the different types of love bombing. We've talked about the importance of self-awareness. But how do we actually become love bomb resistant? What are some practical steps we can take?
Well, Dr. Romani emphasizes that simply knowing about these tactics isn't enough.
Okay.
True resistance
Yeah.
comes from doing that deep internal work,
Okay.
understanding our own vulnerabilities,
Yeah.
and addressing those unmet needs that might be making us susceptible to manipulation.
So it's not just about spotting the red flags in others. It's about recognizing the patterns within ourselves
Exactly.
that might be attracting us to those red flags in the first place.
Yes. It's about asking yourself those tough questions.
Yeah.
Like, why am I so drawn to this person?
Right.
What needs are they fulfilling for me?
Mm-hmm.
Are those needs healthy, or are they stemming from some unresolved issue from my past?
Wow.
It's about uncovering those deeper motivations,
Right
those
there.
subconscious patterns
Yeah.
that might be leading us down a path of unhealthy relationships.
That's such a valuable insight. It's not about blaming ourselves for being manipulated, but rather understanding why we might be vulnerable.
Exactly. And that self-awareness is the foundation for building healthier relationships.
Okay.
It's about recognizing our own worth,
Yeah.
setting healthy boundaries, and being willing to walk away from anything that doesn't align with our values.
So it's about becoming our own best advocate, our own protector.
Yes,
And it sounds like that journey really starts with a deep dive into ourselves.
it does, and it's a journey worth taking.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, we all deserve to be in relationships that are based on genuine connection,
Yeah.
mutual respect, and authentic love, not manipulation and control.
Wow. It's amazing how much ground we've covered, going from defining love bombing to exploring its different variations.
Yeah.
And now this whole crucial aspect of self-awareness.
Right.
I feel like we're really equipping ourselves with like a powerful toolkit
Yeah,
for navigating relationships more consciously.
I agree.
Yeah.
And what's so empowering about this approach is that it shifts the focus, from blaming ourselves for being manipulated to really understanding why we might be vulnerable in the first place.
Yeah.
It's about taking ownership of our patterns and making more informed choices moving forward.
I love that. So how do we practically apply all this knowledge?
Right.
Like, let's say someone's listening to this and they're
Mhm.
thinking, oh, wow, I recognize some of these patterns in my own relationships. What would be your advice to them?
Well, first and foremost, I would say be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
It's not about beating yourself up for past mistakes,
Yeah.
but it's about learning from those experiences
Yes.
and using that knowledge to move forward.
Yeah.
Start by really paying attention to your gut feelings. If
Love
something feels off in a relationship,
Mm.
even if you can't quite put your finger on it,
Yeah.
don't ignore that feeling.
That's so important. We often dismiss those intuitive whispers, but they're usually trying to tell us something
They are.
valuable.
Yeah, and then start exploring those deeper questions we talked about earlier.
Mhm.
What are your relationship patterns?
Right.
What types of people are you drawn to?
Yeah.
What needs are you trying to fulfill through those relationships?
Yeah.
Journaling can be a really helpful tool for this process.
Oh, I'm a big believer in journaling. It's like having a conversation with yourself,
Yes,
uncovering those hidden patterns and motivations.
exactly. And as you start to gain more self-awareness, you can begin setting healthier boundaries.
Okay.
And this might mean saying no more often,
Mhm.
asserting your needs, or walking away from situations that feel manipulative or unhealthy.
It's about recognizing that you deserve to be treated with respect
Yes.
and that you have the right to choose who you allow into your life.
Absolutely.
That's a really empowering message.
It is. And remember, building self-awareness and changing those relationship patterns,
Right.
it takes time.
Yeah.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
So be patient with yourself
Right.
and celebrate those small wins along the way.
I love that it's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
And I think it's important to acknowledge, that even the most self-aware individuals
Yeah,
can still fall prey to manipulation sometimes.
absolutely. We're all human.
Yeah.
We all have blind spots. The key is to learn from those experiences
Yeah.
and to continue to refine our understanding
Yeah.
of ourselves and the
Mhm.
dynamics of relationships.
So speaking of learning, Dr. Ramani and our Spanish source both made a really interesting point about love bombing not being limited to romantic relationships.
So how can we apply this knowledge to other areas of our lives?
That's a great question. I think it's about being mindful of those same patterns and red flags in all of our interactions,
Right.
whether it's with colleagues or friends or even strangers.
Yeah.
Pay attention to people who shower you with excessive praise or try to isolate you from others or make you feel indebted to them.
It's like having a healthy dose of skepticism,
Yeah.
not in like a cynical way,
Right.
but in a way that allows you to really see people's motivations more clearly.
Exactly. And always remember you have the right to question, to set boundaries,
Yeah.
and to protect your own well-being regardless of who you're interacting with.
Such great advice.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
I want to circle back to something you said earlier about kind of flipping the question around
Okay.
instead of just focusing on identifying red flags in others.
Right.
How can we use this knowledge to understand our own patterns of attraction?
That's a really powerful exercise,
Take some time to reflect on your past relationships.
Okay.
Not to dwell on the negative, but to see if you can identify any recurring themes.
Right.
What types of personalities do you gravitate towards?
Hmm.
What qualities do you find irresistible, even if those qualities might have ultimately led to unhealthy dynamics?
It's about getting curious about our own choices,
Yeah.
understanding why we might be drawn to certain people,
Yeah.
even if those choices haven't always served us well.
Exactly. And often the most valuable insights aren't about the other person.
Right.
They're about ourselves.
Yeah.
They're about those deeper longings, those unmet needs that might
Hmm.
be influencing our decisions.
So this deep dive has really been about so much more than just love bombing.
Yeah.
It's been about embarking on this journey of self-discovery,
Okay.
this
Good.
journey that leads us to a deeper understanding of ourselves, our relationships, and like the complex dynamics of human connection.
That's beautifully said.
And that's a journey worth taking, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And I encourage everyone listening to continue exploring these themes.
Yeah.
Keep asking those tough questions
Right.
and keep striving for those healthy, authentic connections in all areas of your lives.
And remember, you're not alone on this journey. We're all figuring it out together.
We are.
So keep digging, keep questioning, keep growing, because the more you know,
Yeah.
the more empowered you become to create a life filled with love, authenticity, and genuine
I
connection.
love that.
Until next time, fellow deep divers.